And we are back here on the Analytical Iowan podcast. It is Saturday, December 20th, as you are listening to this. And as I say almost every day, we've got a lot to talk about because there's always a lot to talk about, especially with this administration. Now, you may be wondering what happened to yesterday's show. Probably went to go find the Analytical Iowan podcast yesterday, and whoops, no show. And now you're staring at December 20th, you're looking at it going, what happened? Well, I record on Zoom, and I don't know what happened. I was about halfway done. Zoom kicked me out. Didn't log me out or anything. Just stopped the video I was recording. Um, and then acted like I had ended the video, and it went ahead and started processing. So I jumped back in, started a new video, and I finished the podcast. I was going to download both halves and just piece them together and call it a day. Well, when I went to go download the first half, it was stuck processing. And I didn't have time to re record an entire hour. Um, so I went about my day. And I kept trying off and on over the day to download it. And at one point, I reached out to Zoom and I tried to talk to technical support to figure out what I could do differently or what I could do to get this to stop processing and to be able to get it posted for everybody. Well, all I could talk to was an AI chatbot. And for people worried that AI is going to take over our jobs, this chatbot was the perfect example of why that's still a little ways off yet. I talked myself in circles for a little bit, and I kept getting told, well, I understand it's frustrating. I know you're mad. But there's not, basically you just got to give it 24 to 48 hours. We don't know why it's doing this, which I'm guessing maybe a real human would have told me the same thing. But then I asked to speak to a real human. And I got told through Zoom that my account does not qualify to speak to a live human for technical support. Now, I don't know if that means I need a higher paid subscription service or what, but I don't qualify. So I just got stuck with the AI chatbot that couldn't help me. And it really irritated me. Now, here we are. I'm recording Saturday's podcast, still waiting for it to download. And I don't know if I'm going to end up uploading the podcast from yesterday. If it doesn't come through probably sometime today, I will probably check it before I record tomorrow's podcast. Um, and if it hasn't come through, then I probably just will not upload it because so much stuff has changed in the world of news and politics that even some of the stories I talked about yesterday have already changed. So we will see. If you do not get yesterday's podcast, I apologize. I didn't have the time after I had gotten it recorded before I had to go to work and do all of those other things um, where I could record again. And I tried off and on throughout the day, like I said, when I had moments to try to get it downloaded, and that just didn't happen. So unfortunately, yesterday's podcast is stuck in limbo. I thought it was pretty good, but like I said, some of the things I discussed in yesterday's podcast have changed. So let's get into it. Now, midnight this morning was the deadline to release the Epstein files. And that's probably going to be the biggest story of the weekend is the Epstein file release. Um, and it landed with a thud. Why? Because as most of us probably predicted, the administration has fucked around. Out of everything they released about 1%, probably less than 1% of everything they had. They they didn't do what they were told to do. There are so many things going on with this whole deal. we knew they were going to try to do a massive cover up. Um, and this is way more blatant than I think anybody expected. It is going to be very hard for this administration to knowingly say that they're not in a cover up, that they're not trying to do this, that it's this and that. I figured they would come out and say, well, there's some kind of um, investigation or something like that. And they didn't really do that. They released part of it. And basically, Todd Blanche said, well, there's too much to release it all, in time. So, and we need more time to redact it. So you're going to get a little bit now and a little bit later, and it's going to come out in waves. At the pace they're going, if it took them 30 days to release less than 1%, just doing this math off the top of my head, that would take them about 300 months or in the neighborhood of about 25 years. Again, very rough math off the top of my head. I don't anticipate this administration being in any sort of a big hurry to release the files. Now, Donald Trump never wanted the files to see the light of day. He came out when they were talking about releasing it saying, well, if you sign the discharge petition to release the Epstein files, you're going to be hostile to this administration. We're going to treat you like you're hostile. We're going to primary you. We're going to do this and we're going to do that. And then the discharge petition happened, and it was voted on in the House 427-1. Now, yes, Donald Trump came out beforehand and said, go ahead and vote for it. But that was because he didn't want to face the political blowback from saying, don't release the Epstein files. He figured, or well, he had been saying that, but he didn't want. It wasn't the political blowback. I misspoke. He didn't want to face the political embarrassment of this vote happening. He was afraid that it was going to end up like it was 427-1, or maybe unanimous, or something like that, right? And then he'd look like a fool for standing in opposition to it. So he said, yeah, go ahead and vote for it. Now, he hoped that it would get to the Senate and they would turn around and the Senate would drag it out for a month or two. And then the Senate passed it in a few hours. Donald Trump thought, okay, I bought myself a month. I'm going to find a way to buy myself some more time. So now they pulled this stunt where they have released a fragment of the Epstein files, just a fragment, and they are hoping that that will get people off their backs, and it's not working. Okay, now when I say a fragment, we are talking, like I said, less than 1% of everything the FBI has. And out of what they have, there is a ridiculous amount of things that are redacted. Now, part of this law, and maybe Congress was being a little optimistic by trying to say they had to do it in a month. Okay, but they gave them 30 days to release the Epstein files, and the other half of it was if anything was redacted, that they had to submit a report to the Oversight Committee or to Congress anyway about what was redacted and why. Now, there is tons of documents in there. There is like one person I saw on TikTok talking about it said that there is a 19-page printout of text message of a text message thread where everything basically is blacked out. We don't know who was talking to who. We don't know what was in any single message. That every last bit was redacted with no explanation. 19 pages gone, just blacked out every single word. You can't tell me that there was, images of abuse of the victims in there, in every single part. Every word was something that they couldn't say, that there was identifiable information that, no, this is just a blatant cover up. And it is so bad. But there were some smoking guns in the Epstein file release itself. Now, there are certain things that they released. They started with releasing pictures, of course, that connect Bill Clinton to Epstein. And we have never said that Clinton didn't know Epstein. Um, Now, there are multiple images of Clinton with Ghislaine Maxwell, with Epstein, and in some cases with women who have their identities redacted. And in some cases, I think there was at least one image of Clinton with looked like in a pool or something. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm getting the images crisscrossed here, but there was an image I'm pretty sure of Clinton with a woman or girl. I don't know if it was of age or not because everything is basically redacted, but both her face and her chest are redacted, giving at least the appearance that she may have been topless. So that could have potentially have been a victim of Jeffrey Epstein. Now, that's not a good look for Bill Clinton. And if he is in the files, if he has done anything, he needs to be held just as accountable as anybody else. I don't care who they are. I don't care what they have done. If they are guilty of doing anything with these um, underage girls, they need to be held accountable. Now, one of the things I'm seeing some creators on TikTok talking about, or commenters anyway, saying that, well, they're fucking around with it. They're going to try to delay it till Donald Trump's out of office because the statute of limitations runs out when Donald Trump is out of office. And I don't think so. I am pretty sure that, like, conspiracy to traffic underage girls and things like that, there is no statute of limitations, not federally. So potentially these charges could still be brought. And I think that if there are charges to be brought, they should be brought against anybody and everybody who is involved, period. Um, Now, some of the images about Donald Trump that they did not get to. There are images of Donald Trump with Epstein, with Maxwell, shows they at least were familiar with each other. Donald Trump wants to claim he didn't know uh, Epstein at all. There is also an image in there that apparently also shows it's one that we've seen before. It apparently was from the birthday book from Epstein, but it had made its way into the hands of the DOJ as part of their investigation at some point into Epstein. And it is the picture of uh, Donald Trump, Epstein, and some woman with an oversized check. And I believe the dollar amount was $25,000 that Donald Trump was paying Epstein for a completely depreciated, and it had the woman's name blocked out. Now, we don't know who that was, if that was another victim, if that was Maxwell. We don't know who it was, okay, or what was going on there. But it's, again, just a bad look for Donald Trump. This is going to be greatly embarrassing. Now, they tried to get and scrub everything, but they didn't get, obviously, to everything. They couldn't get everything redacted. Like, there is a police report in there um, where it looks like at some point they were talking to apparent victims of Epstein, and it was relating to, and it says in the top, child pornography. Uh, there are statements, witness statements. I saw something saying that there is a witness statement going back to the 90s from one of the accusers that has said since the 90s that Epstein was doing these horrible things and that they had tried to get the FBI to do something the whole time. And it has now been corroborated with the DOJ files. Now, the question is, why didn't the DOJ move on it? No idea. Probably to protect the more elite people involved. Was it done if it was the 90s? Clinton would have been president. Was Clinton afraid of being outed for being connected to Epstein and anything he may have done? Was he crooked? Maybe. And if so, he needs to be held accountable for whatever he can be held accountable for. As these files come out and as more and more pictures and images see the light of day, Donald Trump is going to be furious. Now, like I said, they've only released about 1%, and a lot of it is redacted. I saw one creator showing that they had searched through parts of it, and there were gigabytes of images, but it was less than 1% of like just even the images that were there. And a big chunk of them were fully redacted. Like you would have just a couple bits at the very corners of the image that were available that you could see, and that was it. The redactions were horrible in this, that they are trying to clearly either protect people, cover something up, and you can't tell me that all of it appears to be related to the abuse of the victims. That was supposed to be the only things they were covering up. But again, they were also supposed to submit reports to Congress about what they were covering up and why, as far or redacting, I should say. This is evidence this was a cover up. But that what they were trying to redact from the public view as far as what was actually there. Now, there are multiple images of Epstein in there with what appears to be young girls. One of Epstein with apparently what appears to be an underage girl doing ballet. And I think there's also, it might even be the same girl next to Epstein, apparently topless. Um, this is horrific. What is in there is going to shake this country to its core. Even what was released is pretty bad and it's pretty damning. Now, there was also apparently something in there. I don't know if it was an email, a text message, a witness statement, something about how a 14-year-old Epstein victim was taken to Mar-a-Lago and introduced to Donald Trump before he was president. And Epstein made comments about her appearance and how good she looked and stuff like that. And apparently, Donald Trump smiled and nodded approvingly. Again, not a good look for Donald Trump. Now, we don't have all of the facts about what was going on. And we only have a portion of what the DOJ has. And what the DOJ has isn't everything that's even out there. Remember, the Oversight Committee is sitting on like 90,000 images. Now, some of them may overlap with what the DOJ has released or will release, and some of them may not. The Epstein files are this administration's worst nightmare. Now, they are trying to play all kinds of games with this. Like I said, I think it was Todd Blanche said that it was going to take them more time and that they're going to come out in chunks, but that's not what the law says. The law that they passed said everything must be available to the public and released December 19th by midnight. Well, we're on December 20th, and they didn't release all of it. They were missing huge chunks. They didn't even hit the 1% mark. We've talked about that. That just shows how much contempt this administration has. Now, what could happen going forward? Well, I don't know that this law has penalties baked in. Most laws, when they get passed, they would have some kind of failure to do this, or if you do that, would have some kind of a penalty. I don't know if this is one of those laws where they put no penalty in, because as we have found out with Donald Trump, there are varying laws that apparently have no teeth. Things like the Hatch Act and things like that, where, well, if you violate it, there's not much we can do about it. So who would investigate the DOJ for not releasing the files? Well, the DOJ, and they're not going to do anything about it. They're not going to look into themselves. So there's going to be no criminal investigation right now. However, one of the things that could happen is there could be a lawsuit filed against the DOJ, potentially by members of Congress. They could sue the DOJ. and say, well, we have asked you to release the files and you haven't done it. And there could be a court order ordering them to release the files immediately. And I wouldn't think it would take a judge very long to look at this and go, yeah, law's signed, law's valid, law's constitutional. You haven't complied. Make it happen. But again, who would force them to? Well, in this case, it would be the judge with contempt of court proceedings. Now, contempt of court is a very tricky animal. Certain versions of contempt of court are criminal contempt of court, and that would be where, and if it was a criminal charge, yes, a presidential pardon would work, and Donald Trump could pardon them for, going in contempt and this and that. But there's also civil contempt, and not following a judge's order, for example, is considered civil contempt. Now, both, I believe, still could face fines and or prison time. But if it's a civil contempt, and for example, where the order is about following an existing law and turning something over, I believe that falls under civil. Now, some of the attorneys out there, maybe one of them will correct me on this. Again, I know enough about the law, but I am not a lawyer. But civil contempt is not pardonable. So, depending on what happens, the right judge could potentially start holding people in contempt of court. And if they start racking up fines and or, jail sentences, for example, if Pam Bondi, the attorney general, gets held in contempt by a judge for failure to turn over these records, and say she gets held until the DOJ releases everything, there's going to be some pressure to force the DOJ to release everything. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen. I am speculating, but it's a possible outcome. Now, a couple of the other possible outcomes we've talked a lot about is impeachment. Now, Thomas Massie, Representative Massie, and Representative Ro Khanna, Massie being the Republican, Ro Khanna being the Democrat, they co-authored the bill that turned into the Epstein Act. And they're already talking about impeaching Pam Bondi. They are talking about drafting articles of impeachment against Pam Bondi for fucking around with the Epstein files and doing this bullshit release. Why? Because she's in violation. Now, is it going to go anywhere? As I've talked about in other podcasts, I don't know. Because Republicans control the House, they would need 5 Republicans. If you count Massie, 4 more Republicans to go with all Democrats to pass articles of impeachment. Now, they may bring it up. It may get to a floor vote. They haven't said yet whether or not they are going to go for a floor vote on it. But if they do, and it passes the House, as I've talked about in other podcasts, I firmly believe that if a Republican-controlled House and a Republican-controlled Senate vote to pass anything as far as impeachment, that they already know they will have the votes to remove whoever they are impeaching. So Pam Bondi could be impeached and removed. And for her part, Pam Bondi's trying to throw Kash Patel under the bus, saying, well, it's Patel's fault for not releasing what the FBI has. They're the ones holding everything up. It's going to be a big blame game, trying to figure out who is to blame for failing to release the Epstein files and all of it. And they both may end up getting impeached by Massie and Ro Khanna. This whole thing is going to be so messy when it all comes out and when it all hits the fan that we don't know where it's going to stop. Now, I've said before, I think it is entirely possible and within reason to expect that Republicans could use the fucking around with the Epstein files as their way to get rid of Donald Trump. Why? Because they know, or at least they should know by now, that they are going to lose the midterms. And they are scared of losing the midterms and losing the House and the Senate. And unfortunately, one of the things that got cut from yesterday's podcast is I think now, unless they do something by the end of the year on the ACA subsidies, that the House is going to flip to the Democrats by 50 plus. And I think it is entirely possible that the Senate is now almost assured to flip to the Democrats because of the ACA subsidies, because they fucked around. Well, they may be worried about those exact outcomes, and they should have already seen them coming. And they may decide that they have to do something against Donald Trump in order to not have that outcome, because they don't want to answer their voters for protecting somebody who is obviously in the Epstein files, despite the fact that they have done their best to scrub everything so far. And what we have seen is only being a fraction of what they have, only a percentile of what they have. That they don't want to answer their voters for having protected or saved anybody that's in that list. And if it looks like Donald Trump is the one trying to buck it all and the orders are coming from him, that they may impeach and remove Donald Trump themselves. And again, like I was just talking about with Pam Bondi or Kash Patel, if an impeachment passes the House of Representatives, as long as the Republicans hold the House and the Senate, I firmly believe that if they do go to impeach Trump, he will be gone. Now, as this is out, it would not surprise me if in the coming weeks, and might not even take weeks, as public fervor and the backlash comes out from this joke of a release, that Republicans may go to Donald Trump privately and say, "Hey, Donald, you got a choice," and that choice is resign or we're impeaching your ass. And this is the exact same thing Republicans did to Nixon after Watergate. In fact, the similarity here is that Watergate, what they did wasn't the big story, right? The big story of Watergate wasn't, even though it should have been, it wasn't that the President of the United States had members of his party, people he directed, break into the Democratic National Headquarters to spy on the opposition campaign because he was terrified of losing. That should have been the big story, but the big story was the cover up. And that was ultimately what led Nixon to be coerced into resigning. Now, it took like 2 years to get through Watergate. And I don't think this is going to take 2 years. One, Donald Trump's his health is not that great. I don't know that he has 2 years left. But I also think that the public backlash and the need for instant gratification in this is going to be way more severe. There's going to be way more push from the public. And because of all of our methods of communication now, the members of Congress are going to feel that pressure coming from their own party, that they may have no choice but to move on from Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump is not in the best of health. We've been talking about his health being a concern. And we have to be worried about whether or not he even makes it to the end of his term. I don't think he does. The stress of now these Epstein files and the pushback from the thud of a release is not going to play well for Donald Trump and his mental state. He is going to be frazzled. He is going to be erratic. Now, he was doing Thursday, he did an event in the Oval Office. It was signing an executive order on the lowering of marijuana from a class 1 to a class 3 controlled substance. Now, this effectively does the same thing that Joe Biden had already pushed through. It basically says, "Hey, look into it. If we, look, do some studies, look into it, and we're gonna lower it if we can effectively." Now, again, these are executive orders. They can be overturned by the next president. It's not as good as if he passed something through Congress. And as far as it goes, it's effectively just taking a win from something Biden did, which is Donald Trump's good at doing things like that. So, but he was in the Oval Office for this event, and he appeared again to doze off several times during that event. Now, was he sleeping or was he having a mini stroke or something like that? Because his face started to droop again. It was pointed out that he was having muscle control problems. Now, a drooping face is a sign of a stroke, and they're propping him up. It was a far cry from the Donald Trump that was presented to the American public just the night before on Wednesday night when he was screaming into the void about how we should be grateful for him for having the best country and that the country was dead before he took over and we're alive again, and how inflation's zero, which you don't want to have zero inflation. Zero inflation, or basically, or negative inflation, puts you into a depression. And that is the worst thing we could potentially have. We're already worried about a recession. We don't want a depression. But of course, but the Donald Trump that was all full of piss and vinegar and screaming and yelling and full of vitriol was very low key, very lackadaisical. Showed a different Donald Trump. Like I said, his face started to droop. That's not the first time his face has been caught on camera drooping. Is he having more strokes? Or is it that the meds he's been given, are they wearing off? Are they only able to give him so much at a time? Was it, it is entirely possible. We have been told from members of Congress that they believe Donald Trump is getting $26,000 a month anti dementia injections and that he's taking anti dementia pills and things like that. Could it be that whatever they gave him to have him be full of energy to address the nation, by the time they got around to it, they couldn't dose him again because of concerns that they had to let it wear off for so long before they could give him another round? Now, he was supposed to go do a rally last night in North Carolina, and I believe he did. Um, but the rally, again, he's out trying to get in front of the country, trying to talk about how good the economy is and how great things are going for him. Problem is, the only person that believes it is himself. Well, and some of the Trumplefucks, but they're too dumb to know what's going on. How can they believe the economy and everything is going so great when you go to the store and you see the prices with your own eyes? A couple of them I talk about all the time. Price of ground beef before sales, a lot of times around here, is getting up between $8 and $10 a pound. And I'm in Iowa. We grow beef. Now, I know there's going to be people here, specifically in Iowa, that say, well, I don't pay grocery store prices. I raise my own. Good for you. Or somebody who raises beef. I know several people uh, locally who will sell like a quarter of a cow at a time. And you pay so much per pound and you get your choice basically. Everything costs the same because it's all you're buying, you know, a percentage of the cow basically. That's great if you can afford to do it, but a lot of us don't have the money to go out and spend hundreds of dollars on a half a side of beef or a quarter of a side or a side. It's a lot of beef and it's a lot of cost. We don't have that kind of money. So we have to go buy it at the store. Well, when you're getting up to $10 a pound on beef, that's ridiculous. And that's just for ground beef. That's not talking about your steaks and things where it's just gone up ridiculous. The other one I talk about all the time is soda. And you guys always see me with a can of soda in my videos, right? Well, just a few years ago, you could routinely still get them on sale, 3 for 10, 4 for 10. maybe even 6 for 10 on a good sale, like a great once a year type sale, right? Huge savings. Problem is, now they're almost $10 a 12 pack. $10 a 12 pack, 3 or 4 years later. You can't tell me that everything's more affordable, Donald Trump, when I can see it with my own eyes. Now, obviously, if you watch your sales and you know you get your good prices, you can still get them relatively cheap. A lot of what I buy, I wait for it to go on sale, and I'm getting them around $3.99, $4.99, $5.99 a piece. Not great, but cheaper than $10 a 12 pack. And you have to do that now in this economy. You're watching and you're cutting your corners. And I know I'm cutting other things out of my diet because of it to keep the caffeine coming. But Donald Trump wants us to believe everything is affordable. It's just not. Now, he dozed off during this signing of the reclassification of marijuana. Okay. And if they did reclassify it, great, good, wonderful. I believe this basically just continues what Joe Biden did, but it's something Donald Trump can take for a win. The real win would be going to Congress and passing a law to actually decriminalize it completely, not have it be part of the list at all, make it legal. That would be great. He would get a win. I would give him credit for that. But they're not going to do that. They're taking the cheapest win they can get here, which is by saying, "Yeah, we're gonna make it a less controlled substance, a lower controlled substance here." Now, um, Donald Trump just did not look good. He looked very low energy doing that. I have not seen any clips of him from that rally in North Carolina. But why is he out rallying? Well, he's going to be spending the 2026 midterms campaigning like he was running for president. Why? A couple of reasons, I think. One, he wants the ego boost. He misses the campaigning, he misses the rallies. He doesn't care about necessarily being president. He does to an extent because it's about the ego trip, right? But he likes the adulation of the crowd and being out in front. So he wants to get that. He needs that dopamine hit. So he's got a chance to go out in front of crowds again. Sure. Now he can also use it to do grift and start collecting campaign donations again. Now we'd heard during the 2024 election that what he had done is that for a lot of the donations, if any members of Congress that were Republican had used Donald Trump or the MAGA logo or the MAGA slogan or anything, that he would get like a fraction. I think it was something like, actually, I shouldn't even say a fraction, like a big cut of whatever donations. And it was like, well, oh, you use the MAGA name? Well, I want a taste of what you get in donations, and it goes into my campaign fund. I don't know how legal that is, but it wouldn't surprise me if he's trying to find a way to grift off of the other members of Congress and the senators that are running and saying, well, if I campaign for you, if you use my image, if I show up at an event for you, I want a cut of whatever you raise. Donald Trump only cares about the grift. It's trademark Donald Trump, it's trademark narcissism. It's never going to change with him. This is all he is about. So he wants to get back out in front of the crowd, and I think he's trying to get a taste there. The other thing he is trying to do is he is trying to prevent a blue wave from happening in November of next year. He's worried about losing the House. He's worried about losing the Senate. And he doesn't want to appear like a loser. He doesn't want to go out on a bad term. Now, I think that, or I had said before the House fucked around and dipped out without actually passing anything on the ACA subsidies. And unfortunately, I covered that yesterday in the podcast that is in limbo, um, that they didn't pass anything on the ACA subsidies, and I don't think they're going to come back and do it. Now, if they do, that would be the smartest thing they could do. I think if they don't pass the ACA subsidies by the end of the year and people get that first premium hit, that first due date for a premium where it is the ridiculously high premium, we heard some people were going to go from $500 to $2,000 premiums monthly, I think. Who can afford $2,000 a month for health coverage through the ACA? If you can afford $2,000 coverage, you probably wouldn't, you'd be able to just go out and get your own policy at that point. It would probably be cheaper than going through the exchange, you would think. But see, Republicans don't care. And if they let the ACA subsidies expire and they go into next year and people start getting those high hits, those high premium dues, they are going to turn around, and I think they could lose the House by 50 plus. And I think it all but guarantees the Senate flips to uh, Democrats, period. And Donald Trump's terrified of that. He's afraid of getting impeached again. Now, he should be afraid of his own party impeaching and removing him because of the fuckery with the Epstein files. But he's worried about Democrats impeaching and removing him. Now, Nancy Pelosi is coming out and saying, well, yeah, we tried impeaching him twice before. We're just not going to do it again. Well, I hate to put it like this, but I don't give a fuck what Nancy Pelosi says about next term if the Democrats take the House back. Why? She's not running for reelection. She won't be in Congress. It won't be her decision. Now, if the Democrats put Hakeem Jeffries up as Speaker, it very well could be her decision because he listens to Nancy Pelosi. But if they put up something like AOC, someone like AOC, I would have said Jasmine Crockett, but she's not running for reelection. Or anybody else. Maybe Jamie Raskin, or who knows? There's so many good Democrats in the House of Representatives that they could put up for Speaker that wouldn't be listening to Nancy Pelosi. And if they do that and they have a better Speaker, there's a good chance Donald Trump gets impeached by the Democrats. Now, Donald Trump's terrified of that outcome. He doesn't want to see any of it happen. And if he gets impeached a third time, I mean, he already holds the record for two. I don't know if three, the third one, if it happens before Democrats take over, will be the one that gets him out of politics. That will be the one that would remove him if Republicans do it. But there's also a chance that the Republicans may back it if the Democrats lead it after they take over the House. If this guy comes through and they get wiped to shreds they get wiped out in the midterms, right? They lose the House by 50, 60 seats. We see safe red districts, what should have been safe red flipping to Democrat, then they might go, fuck this shit. We got to get rid of this motherfucker. We want to have a chance in 2028. And they get rid of Donald Trump. Then they go with JD Vance. Now, we had been hearing about this idea, and people are terrified of JD Vance being president, right? They say he's going to be worse than Donald Trump. Well, think about this. The Republicans don't like JD Vance, not really. That apparently he's not well liked. He's not going to have the same pull that Donald Trump has over the Republican Party. Okay? He doesn't have the same presence, the same ability to command. None of it is going to go JD Vance's way, right? And if it happens after the Democrats take over Congress, it's not going to matter. JD Vance won't be able to get anything through Congress. And the filibuster is going to be our biggest ally if we don't take over the Senate. Because a lot of things are going to require 60 votes. And it's just not going to happen. Now, if Democrats have control of both chambers of Congress or even one chamber, 2 years are going to be spent, nothing gets passed. Republicans are going to be shown yet again, it's going to show the American people that Republicans can't govern. That's what's going to come out of this. Okay. Now, Republicans may be hoping that they can spin some sort of a narrative making J.D. Vance a sympathetic target. And what I mean by that is by saying, well, hey, J.D. Vance only had 2 years to be president. He hasn't had time to fix all the problems. Again, they're going to blame Biden, that Biden left, even though the problems that Biden left were still fixing the problems from the Trump administration. But Republicans don't care about the reality there. And they'll say, well, see, the Democrats blocked him from fixing anything. So you got to give him another term and give us control of Congress again. I can already see that argument being made, but I don't think it's going to work because the generation that would have believed that would be the boomers and the older generations, and they're dying off. The younger generations are looking for facts. They're not falling for the normal routine of media push. Places like Fox News and things like that aren't working as well with the younger generations, at least from what I can tell. Now, they listen to podcasters like myself. They listen to other sources to get their information. So Republicans are really going to have to push to try to make anything happen there. I don't think it works. But we had heard, or we had speculated, I should say, about what would happen. Who would JD Vance get as his VP? Well, there was an article I read that had an interesting theory. Apparently, Turning Point had been in discussions with JD Vance about the possibility of in 2028 JD Vance Charlie Kirk ticket. We had heard that Charlie Kirk was a rising star in the Republican Party. He wasn't quite old enough, I think, or he would have been the running mate for Donald Trump this time. He was apparently going to be the heir apparent to MAGA. And now he's gone. But if the idea or the plan had been for J.D. Vance to pick Charlie Kirk to be the running mate going into 28, then it would fall to reason that if something happened to Donald Trump, that as long as he was old enough, Kirk would have been the pick. And that's just terrifying. Charlie Kirk actually had the charisma to do some of the things that Donald Trump is able to do. But he's also, or was also, older or younger than Donald Trump and healthier, and all of the other negative baggage that we have and we know about Donald Trump wasn't connected to Charlie Kirk. Now, I like to say when it comes to conspiracy theories, I don't buy into them. I would prefer facts. But reading that article about this plan for Charlie Kirk to be potentially the running mate of JD Vance makes me question what happened to Charlie Kirk. Was this a politically motivated attack with the idea being with somebody close to Donald Trump putting it in the works to prevent Charlie Kirk from upstaging Donald Trump and taking some of his thunder? Donald Trump doesn't want there to be an heir apparent to MAGA. He wants to run for a third term. He keeps joking about it. Now, they say he's joking. Donald Trump doesn't really know what a joke is. Well, maybe. I mean, he does have to look at Eric and Don Jr., but I don't think he really knows what a joke is. And he has talked about running for a third term. Now, he can't legally. That hasn't stopped this administration from trying to do all sorts of things that they shouldn't have been able to do legally. But Donald Trump wants to run or thinks he could potentially run for a third term. He's not going to be around for a third term. something's going to happen. His health isn't going to be there. He's going to be removed by his own party or something. But considering that he has his eyes on that third term, it wouldn't surprise me if somebody put the idea in his head to do something to get rid of the heir apparent so he doesn't have to name one. So he can always be the center of attention. And I hate to think like that, but that's because it's Donald Trump. With everything that surrounds us, man, you always end up wondering, could it really happen? Is it a thing? You know, and the question comes back with, well, maybe. And that in itself is a scary predicament. Now, one of the last stories I want to talk about is Donald Trump and the Kennedy Center. Donald Trump wants to rename the Kennedy Center the Trump Kennedy Center. Now, that sounds dumb on the surface, but part of the reason why he wants to do it, and again, this was a part of that missing podcast, and if I can somehow get it uploaded, if it ends up kicking out of processing, I think that's what I'm going to title it, is the missing podcast. But anyway, he's worried about his legacy. And that leads me to believe that there's something wrong with Donald Trump. We were talking about it earlier about his health. I don't think he's in very good shape. And I think he is aware on some level that he is not well. He's talked about making it to heaven and he's worried about doing things for his legacy. You know, he wants to build a ballroom, which again, we've heard the price tag keeps going up. I think now we're up over 350, maybe into $400 million for something that was going to cost 250. And we still don't even know if it's going to be able to be completed. But he wants to rename the Trump Kennedy Center. It's a vanity project, so he has some legacy. He looks around and he sees all of the things that are named after other presidents. He wants monuments to himself. He wants to build an Arc de Triomphe like they have in France, which would be the Arc de Trump. But people like Washington and Lincoln didn't go out demanding monuments to themselves in the moment. Those came later after you earned them through being a good leader, a good president. Donald Trump is neither. And but he's trying to do all this. Well, come to find out that the Kennedy Center is a National Historic Site, I believe. And to rename National Historic Sites, you can't just do it like he's trying to do with just saying, well, the board agreed, and so we're going to rename it. Now, he could try it, but it actually requires an act of Congress. And guess what? Republicans in Congress aren't too keen to do it. They realize that passing something that would actually do that wouldn't benefit them politically. There's not enough gain and a lot of things to lose from doing it. So it doesn't sound like it's going to go anywhere. Now, it wouldn't stop him from trying to rename it. Here's the thing. If he does pass an executive order or just directs them to go do it or what have you, as soon as he's out of office, and this is what he doesn't realize, again, in part because he thinks he can get himself a third term and because he's not in the right mind, he's convinced he's going to be around forever or that Republicans are going to be in power forever. The next president will just undo it. They'll just take his name off. There's also a federal statute that says in order to get something named after yourself, like a building or something like that, um, you can't be a living president. You can't be alive, basically. There are rules in place that say, when it comes to the naming rights for certain things, that they have to be done after people who are no longer alive. Same with coins. Donald Trump wants to mint a coin for the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, quote, commonly known as America's 250th birthday. And he wants to put his face on it. But yet there's federal laws that say you can't put a living person's face on money without an act of Congress to approve it. And again, they don't want to do that. Congress doesn't. I don't know if it'll stop Donald Trump, and I don't know what kind of punishments would come out if they try to do things like this. Um, because with a lot of these laws, we've found out that there's no teeth. But even if he does it and he passes and they put something on the Kennedy Center, renaming it, as soon as he's gone, maybe not with J.D. Vance as president, but with a Democrat as president, it's going to get scrubbed off. It's going to go back to being the Kennedy Center. And they're going to try to fix and mend and repair all of the damage that this administration has caused. And Donald Trump is looking for something more. He wants a legacy. He wants something to be remembered by. This, I don't think, is going to be it, but he's trying. And of course, when it comes to Donald Trump, he's failing because he fails at everything he does. So, all right, that's going to do it for the Analytical Iowan podcast for today. I'll be back tomorrow to talk about even more stuff, probably even more of the fallout from the disastrous release of the Epstein files. What was released was bad enough, but it was only a percentile of what was actually released. And there's going to be fallout. There's going to be blowback from this. And we're going to have to see what Republicans do to hold this administration accountable, because they need to be held accountable for ignoring the law. But are we really surprised when it comes to Donald Trump that he chose to just ignore a law that he thought was inconvenient? So that's going to do it for the Analytical Iowan podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. Hope you have a great day, and we will be back tomorrow.